Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric in our long-running series, the Unported playlist, where I take a look at some of my favorite unported arcade games of all time. And today, to kick off October, we have a really special one for you guys, and that is Luigi's Mansion Arcade. It's a Nintendo franchise game that was made by Capcom that's running on the Sega new arcade hardware. So basically, outside of Microsoft and Sony being involved, it's got all the greatest hits as far as game makers are concerned. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But this is the sequel to Luigi's Mansion and Dark Moon, and you can tell it is a pivot because this is playing from the first person perspective versus third person in all the Luigi's Mansion games. But I've always loved Luigi's Mansion as far as the franchise is concerned. It's Nintendo pivoting and doing something different, and Capcom here turning it into a pseudo light gun game did an excellent job of capturing the imagination and look of Luigi's Mansion while keeping the gameplay intact and making it more expansive. Because if you've ever played an arcade cabinet for this game, and I will tell you right now, I have not, I've only looked up photos, you have a light gun that's in the shape of the poltergust that you can aim at the screen. I have never seen a cabinet for this game. I think it was quite rare. If you know of one in the US, so leave me a comment down below, because if it's close, I would drive and play it. But playing this on a PC with Technopair with either an analog controller or a Sinden light gun or something like that is going to be just as good of an experience. And if you've never played this game before, I highly recommend it, not just because it's October and it's the spooky season, but also because it is just so much fun to play. It's Luigi's Mansion in first person as an arcade game, and let me tell you, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Because what Capcom did with the Luigi's Mansion formula was absolutely spectacular. This game is just so much fun in first person, and if Nintendo ever releases a real VR headset for the Switch or a console in the future, and they don't bring Luigi's Mansion Arcade over to it, they are making a big miss, because as much fun as this is in 2D, something like this in virtual reality would be absolutely spectacular. But that's just presuming and thinking of what it could be. Let's really talk about what it is. This game is relatively difficult, not only for a Nintendo game, but for a game in the Mario franchise, because there are so many different ghosts on screen at once that you have to manage. It is a very simple formula. You have that flash bulb that you need to stun the ghost with, just like in the console games, and then you have your vacuum, which you need to suck the ghost up with. If you move the analog stick or the cursor left and right, you pull on the ghost just like you did in the game. So screen management is really important, because if you stun more than one ghost at a time, you can vacuum up more than one ghost at a time, making it easier on you and by proxy easier on Luigi. There's a lot of strategy to this game. It's not just aim and shoot. It's thinking about when you want to release that flash bulb. But if this character looks familiar to you, that's because he is in the console and handheld games as well. So Capcom was definitely borrowing a lot of art assets from Nintendo and pivoting them and using them in a different way. And the first person perspective just absolutely makes this game shine. That's not a strike on the console games or the handheld games being in the third person. Those are some of my favorite Nintendo games of all time as well. But this universe, these castles, these mansions in Luigi's Mansion Arcade really do shine in the first person. It's a new perspective to play the game from. And if you've loved this franchise and you've never played it, this to me is as good as any of the console or handheld games ever were. It's different, but it's the same at the same time, if that makes sense. But this game also has awesome cutscenes and awesome soundtracks, so go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds or a minute, and I'll come back and keep talking about Luigi's Mansion. But enjoy, because this game is just so much fun.
Ho ho! Got it! Luigi? Oh! Yeah! Ho ho!
I mean, obviously that's just borrowed soundtrack from the console and handheld games, and the sound effects are borrowed as well, but because Nintendo does such a great job at building a universe, not just visually and gameplay wise, but also in the soundtrack, you know that if they're just using Nintendo assets, it's gonna be good. And you will see here that we are starting to get some harder ghosts on screen that have more life. You really need to decide who you want to hit on the screen first, because some enemies like the bats there will just die with the flashbulb, but other enemies will have life indicators on them, 3, 9, 25, and you might want to knock out a few 3s before you go to that 9 so you can get them off the screen quicker. But I just love the boss battles in this game. They're all inventive, they're all creative, and they all come with great cutscenes before the boss battles actually start. There's only 3 areas in this game, and you can beat Luigi's Mansion in about 40 minutes. I will put up a long play next Monday so you can watch the entire game if you've never seen it. But the 40 minutes that are here are just so much fun. And I love the pacing of the game as well, because I love an action-packed light gun game where it's start to finish unloading guns on enemies. But I also love this because it's so strategy-based. These ghosts are going to pop up, and only one of them is going to move the mirror down so you can actually flash them. The other ghost is going to keep that mirror up, which makes them invincible. So you really need to be thinking the entire time that you're playing Luigi's Mansion Arcade as to just what you want to do, because you can either succeed or fail based upon your instincts. Now, I really do wish I could find a cabinet for this game because it is massive. It is a cabinet that you walk into and draw the curtains, and I know it's probably one of the most fun things to play. But playing this on a PC with TechnoParrot is great as well, so don't think just because this isn't in a cabinet you're missing something. This game controls perfectly, it plays perfectly. I've beaten it more than once start to finish with absolutely no freezing whatsoever, so if you do want to check this game out, just go ahead and look it up with the words TechnoParrot and you will find it very easily. It's just one of those games that's so much fun. It's interesting that they had Capcom develop this versus Nintendo doing it in-house, but Capcom was a great choice because they took everything that made Luigi's Mansion good and just turned it into a first-person arcade game. They didn't try to add in mechanics that weren't in the games that people loved. They just took those mechanics and pivoted them to be something that was more of an arcade experience in that first person. And it makes me hope that one day Nintendo decides to do a first-person Luigi's Mansion for the Switch or for whatever console they come up with next, because I think Luigi's Mansion has a place as both a third-person game as well as a first-person game. But I will say, even though obviously Nintendo is a very kid-centric company and the Luigi's Mansion franchise is definitely aimed at both kids and adults, this game can be quite hard, especially in the last stage. You're going to be sinking a decent amount of credits into this game, and you'll see that the only other mechanic that we have now that's easier to use later on is the surge. If you're vacuuming that enemy up long enough and that boost gauge goes to full, if you push the flashbulb button, you're going to send a jolt of electricity down that poltergust line and it'll knock your enemies out quicker. You just always need to be thinking what you want to do strategically, because if you play this game correctly, it becomes a lot easier, and if you're not playing it the right way, you're going to be burning through imaginary credits. But that's the other thing about Luigi's Mansion Arcade that is so much fun. You want to replay it the minute you finish it, and at least for the first stage, there are alternate branching paths, so you need to play this game at least twice to be able to see the whole thing. But Capcom is really definitely giving Nintendo a run for their money as far as making cutscenes in the Luigi's Mansion universe, because this looks, feels, and plays exactly like what you would expect had Nintendo developers and artists made it as well. It is just perfect. And of course, because it is a Luigi's Mansion, King Boo is the final boss. He's one of my favorite characters in the Mario franchise outside of Yoshi. I just love him as a boss. I love his sound effects. I love his voice. I love everything about King Boo being the final boss of this game. And like I said, this cabinet was probably relatively rare because it was massive. This is something that took up a lot of floor space in arcades, and it's probably why I've never seen it yet. But leave me a comment down below and tell me if you know where one is, because I would be curious. Or leave me a comment and tell me if you've played this game, because I want to hear others' impressions of it. Because these games aren't going to get as much representation, because running them on a computer is not hard, but it's definitely a lot harder than just loading up a ROM in MAME, hitting play, and just sitting back and enjoying it. It takes a little bit more legwork. But I can assure you, if you put the legwork in, you're going to genuinely enjoy playing Luigi's Mansion Arcade. It is just such a fun game. Capcom did a great job at standing in for Nintendo and making a Nintendo game, and I just love the fact that this is a Nintendo franchise developed by Capcom and released on Sega arcade hardware. In the late 90s, early 2000s, if something like that happened, you would say absolutely not. Those companies would never work together. But here they worked together and they made an incredible game. Short of that, that's Luigi's Mansion Arcade. If you've never played it, owe it to yourself to play it this spooky season. I'll be back next Sunday with a Halloween-themed episode of Unported Playlist. I'll have videos throughout the week. See ya, King Boo. Bye-bye.